Hey everybody, it's Mama Kay coming back at you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And in talking with this next guest, we were trying to figure out exactly when we met each other. And we're figuring it's almost 20 years that we've known each other in the music community. But lately we've gotten to know each other a little bit more in union activities, as well as in our fight for equity and social justice. So that makes me just adore them even more. So without further ado, special guest, who are you?
I am Kristjanna Oleson. Hello, everyone.
And
And
what do you do?
what do I do? Well, that's a big question. But in the music world, what I do is I'm a teacher at École Précécent, which is in the DSFM, or Division Scolaire Franco-Manitobain. And yeah, and I play music. I love playing music.
And how long have you been there?
I've been there for 2 years now. And before that, I was in Seven Oaks School Division, which I adore and is my home away from home. Um, so yeah, I started in Seven Oaks and yeah, love it.
Have you always been a music teacher in this way in the school system?
So I started teaching in the school system at 30, and I've been teaching for 12 years in the school system. So that kind of outs my age, but that's okay.
It's a fantastic age to
It
be.
is a fantastic.
Embrace the 40s.
It is, and we're so young, 40 years young, that's what I like to say. So I had started teaching though, I was thinking about when I started teaching, and actually, Joanne, this is really funny. The first music teaching experience I ever had was in grade 8. And I was teaching a neighborhood, 2 neighborhood kids, flute, of all things.
No way.
Of all things, yeah. I had learned how to play from a music teacher in grade 6, and this is before the band days started in grade 6. But yeah, and ironically, I didn't even play flute in band. When I did play in band, I played French horn, but I had learned how to play the flute, and I had gotten kind of obsessed with it personally. And there was a neighborhood family who had asked my parents if I would be open to giving them some lessons. And so I did for a year, and I'm not sure how good they were, but yeah, that would have been my first teaching experience.
So now French horn player, but what is your main instrument?
Yeah, so my main instrument. So I started playing violin at 3 years of age in the Suzuki music program. And I studied, played in youth orchestra, did a number of, string quartets and things like that in my junior high and high school years, and continued playing violin. And then in university, when I started at university, I did 1 year on violin, and then I ended up switching over to viola and never gave up the violin. So I would say I did both, violin and viola, and continued to be a violin and viola player.
What did you end up graduating with?
So I ended up graduating with my viola, yeah, with a performance degree. And that was in 2001. I had started in 95, and I left music for 2 years, and you and I were talking about that. And there's a number of people I think that have, that sort of take a hiatus of sorts from the School of Music. And I think one of the reasons why is, it's intense. It's an intense experience. If you're going to do it right, it's intense. You're really playing 9 hours a day between practicing and rehearsals and all of that. And I felt like I needed to take a little bit of time out to grow up, I think, have some experiences. I also was really into playing guitar and songwriting, and I had kind of started dabbling with that at a really young age in my house. And so I spent the next 2 years sort of jamming with friends and playing in cafes and really sort of exploring myself as a musician in other ways, and wondering whether or not I wanted to study or how I wanted music to be a part of my life. Thought about music therapy. I think all of the things that many of us as musicians think about, how do we want music to be present in what we're doing. And I went back to school in, I think it would have been 1998. And before going back, my teacher, David Stewart, his wife, she had her dad's viola, and she said, why don't you borrow this for the summer? And I was heading back up to my job in Riding Mountain National Park as a parkie, and I said, okay. And I spent the summer sort of just playing all of my violin rep on the viola. And I fell in love with the sound. And I always had this feeling like I love music and I really like the violin, really like it. But then I started playing viola and I was like, ooh, yeah, I love the violin. There's something about the tone. And I think it really got me thinking about the fact that we as human beings, I think that music is and should be a human right, not a privilege. But there are so many different sounds that you can potentially connect with. And finding that sound that you really connect with, I mean, there's nothing better and more motivating than when you find something that you feel really speaks to your soul. And once you find that, the motivation to play, the motivation to learn is just so ever present. And I've always found that there are a lot of adults who sort of are still searching for what sound or what kind of instrument they really connect with. And you can tell when they found it. So I always encourage people to keep looking, searching for their instrument.
Well, there's actually been a few people I've interviewed that have talked about the first time they went to go watch the Winnipeg Symphony, and a certain sound just jumped out at them. And it's like, I know I need to play that. That's my sound. For me, that's when I really heard the flute for the first time. It was like, I didn't know anybody who played flute. It was just like, oh my God, I heard it in the Nutcracker. It's like, I want to play this. And it was before band, right? I started playing flute 2 years before band started, right? It was one of those, it spoke to me, right? And it still does.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think, I had, I feel like I was lucky to have this folk playing, hootenanny, self-taught guitar father who wanted a violinist to jam with him. And so he put me in violin. And I happened to, I asked my mom once, why did you never let me quit? And she said, well, you never wanted to. I did other things like ballet and gymnastics, and I don't know, I never was much into swimming, but I, did lessons, but wasn't that motivated. But I guess music and violin was something that I connected to enough that I felt like I wanted to do it. But there was a point in my life where I wasn't sure if I was doing it just because it's what I'd always done, or whether or not I really loved it. And I think that's part of sometimes pulling away from something for a little while. And I missed it. I missed it deeply. I'd see friends from School of Music and hear about what they were learning about. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to be doing. And yeah, I really wanted to go back. But then finding that viola sound, and one thing that actually, which is interesting, I'm just thinking now, I always was drawn to the inner voices of songs and of melodies, because I would hear something and I'd say, wow, that's giving me this feeling. You can take one note and you change the undertones of what's happening, even with the bass, right? But those middle voices they are like the feeling behind what's happening on top and below. And I'm just so drawn to that,
I know when I listen to Eric Whittaker's compositions, his vocal music, it's just like, that's where all the richness is, right? It's like this beautiful soaring stuff up top, but then if you listen to what's happening so close inside and just shifting little bits by little bit, but it changes everything.
It's the magic.
So I'm gonna fling you way back, because we've talked a little bit about what you when the age that you were when you got into playing and all that. But yeah. I'm curious, what was your school situation like for music class? Let's go back to baby Kristjanna. So talk us through what your journey was education wise, just in the public school system, right?
Oh, sure. Okay. So public school more so than private?
Well, you can mix it together.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So interestingly, so started at 3, doing Suzuki music program. So had the private lesson with Marcia Graham, who many people at U of M would have known her because she had an office there, and then switched over to Marianne Williams, and she was my heart. I apparently said as a kid, I want to be like Marianne Williams when I grow up. And
I'm friends with her daughter.
Oh, she's just a beautiful human being. She meant a lot to me growing up. I can't talk about my musical experience without talking about her, because she really understands relationships too. And we had a great relationship. So going to lessons had as much to do with wanting to learn from her, because I mean, she could help you just play very beautifully, as it did with just wanting to be with her, you know, and spend some time with her. And had the group lessons, started orchestra in grade 5. So at one point in time in my life, I hope you're not seeing my screen.
No, I just heard a ding.
Yeah, sorry.
All good, all good.
Okay, at one point in time in my life, I ended up I guess I was taking 3 lessons a week. Yeah, so it was three music lessons a week, and that was it was great. It was great. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And then as I grew up, I ended up going, you know, I'll just like go back to the public school system for a sec. I had a wonderful elementary music teacher, Madame Dumont, and she just let me be in the music room, you know, and it just gave me so much joy to play music. Now, what's interesting there is that we had a string program, but the music teacher said, don't take the string program because you'll be bored. So I ended up staying in the general music program, which is funny because it ended up probably being the best thing for me because I learned so much, and she did Orff-based music lessons. She's the one who taught me how to play the flute. She's the one who taught me how to play the drum kit. So she sort of exposed me to so much more than what I already knew. But it also was interesting too, because the people in my life and at school didn't see me as a string player. So I wasn't a part of the orchestra, you know, concerts or programs.
What school was that?
And so that was École Guillot and then Collège Béliveau. And then I went to MBCI in grade 10. And I joined their choir with Tim Taves, who's amazing. And I didn't take band there, even though I probably should have, but it was just too much in terms of what I was doing. But I was known as a string player there. A couple of my friends there I was in orchestra with, and you know, always was asked to play in the pit. I always wanted to be on stage, but always got asked to play in the pit, so I would just do that. Yeah, and they had practice rooms there, and so I practiced during the day. A very good friend, Catherine Kozlowski, who's a pianist. She's in the States now, but she studied in BC. I think she's in the States now, yeah. And her and I would just like play all sorts of stuff together during our preps, our spares. And yeah, it was a really positive experience. I felt like music. I also ended up becoming friends with this group of guys that were all as obsessed with music as I was. I mean, I think that was a really important thing for me as a kid. My best friends were obsessed with music. You know, we were all just huge music lovers of all sorts. But these guys, you know, they loved the Pixies and they loved U2, and they loved, like, we just had so much in common in terms of what types of music we listened to. And one of them was Ben Reimer, who we know is a drum teacher and drum player and amazing percussionist. And so yeah, so we've been friends since grade 10.
He teaches out at Brandon, does he not?
Not anymore. No, he lives in Montreal.
Okay. I'm behind.
Yeah, he's just performing up a Storm and doing all kinds of stuff. Him and his wife, Jennifer Thiessen, who he's married to. And so so that group of guys were part of, I don't know, I feel like they were my touchstone at school too, having a good community of people to like connect with musically at school was new to me because I didn't have that at Belleville, and I didn't have that at Gio so much. So yeah, I really found my place, and that definitely solidified sort of that as I moved through my adult life. You know, it was really important to me to connect with people um, who felt connected to music too.
So what really gave you the push to go into like studying music at university? What did you have a certain person that pushed you that way, or you just knew?
No, I would say opposite. You know, my parents always felt that music should be a hobby, not necessarily a career. Um, and they were extremely supportive, but they also were worried about if I could make a living, uh, which I think most parents are concerned about when they don't know the industry, right? Um, and the possibilities or how you go about that. But um, I felt like it was, I didn't know what else to do really. So that was really, so I thought, well, yeah, I'll do an audition and see, you know, see if I get in and sort of like try that out, see what happens. Um, and then while I was at school at university, David Stewart just really, I was studying with David Stewart and he pushed me really hard. And I loved it. I really felt like he taught me how to teach, I would say, in some ways, as did Marion in terms of how like what kind of teacher I am now. Um, but with David, you know, he really was able to break down the basic elements of how to spin sound, and make it just gorgeous. Um, but that didn't come without without a huge expectation of making sure that you were prepared. You know, you had to be ready. And so I feel like after that year, I really knew what it was going to take to be the kind of musician that I felt like I wanted to be. And that's why I took 2 years off, because I wasn't ready. You know, I wasn't ready for that. I really had to mature. I had to get a little bit more mature before I could really um, put my all into it. And so then I really knew I wanted to do it. Now, interestingly, too, one of those 2 years off, I did a year of education, and that's back when the education degree was a 4-year degree, and they didn't have the after degree program at U of M. And I wasn't ready for that. Like, I didn't feel that I was very ready for that. But at that time, I was actually taking a course, and it was Aboriginal music with with with
With Burleson?
Burleson and Walter Bones.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Oh,
Yeah.
it for me that was life changing. That course was, it changed so much for me. I had come home from that and just be for hours pumped, so pumped.
Joanne, were we in that course together?
We might have been.
I think we might have been in that course together. I think we were. Did we end up? We ended up being like, okay, the year I was there, we ended up having the sharing circle came and did a.
Yes, and I got to. Were you singing around the drum too?
Yes, yeah.
That we did it together.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. Okay. Well, Walter Bones has a lot to do with my story, because we would go for coffee a lot, because back in, you know, I was taking that course before I had come back into the School of Music. So I was just taking it as an elective while I was in education.
Was it night too, wasn't it? Was it Tuesday night or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And during the day, you know, between my classes and stuff, and yeah, I wasn't practicing 9 hours a day. I had more time, and Walter would be around the university, and we'd hang out and go for coffee. I met his family, and we had a lot of talks. And I talked to him about the fact that I was feeling really conflicted about whether or not I should do music or I should do education. And he said to me something that was really, I've held on to this little nugget of advice, and I've gone back to it over and over and over again in my life. And what he said to me was, he said, right now, it's a bit dangerous for you because you're holding on to two things. You need to hold on to one thing, learn from that, then let it go, and then hold on to the next thing, learn from that, and let it go. And it really clarified for me the fact that I needed to study music. I didn't want to study education. I needed to study music. And so I went back and I did my performance degree. And then after doing that degree, like I moved to Ottawa for a little while. I played, I came back, I played in bands, I went to the Junos, I got nominated for a Western Canadian Music Award at one point in '06. I had a great time playing. I was getting lots of calls from all kinds of people, and it was a great time, and I was really like going. Now I wasn't making much money, but I was busy, and I was playing a lot with dancers and doing really interesting projects. And I felt I had started teaching a little bit. And then I had realized that like I was sort of going back and forth between the teaching and performing world a little bit. And what I came to realize is that for me, and this is just for me, we're all different. For me, just performing wasn't doing it for me. I just felt this lack. I felt this emptiness. But then when I was really intensely teaching, it made me want to perform more. Like the teaching really made me want to get out there and be really good at what I was doing. And so then I was like, okay, there's something there. You know, you got to listen. You got to listen to those little twinges of, they're like signs, you know, little lampposts sort of lighting up. Oh, this path, you know, and I could feel that there was something a little bit more in that direction. Then I just sort of started opening myself up to experiences. So I started a violin program at Grosvenor Elementary. And I guess before that, I had done an outreach at Rasbrook House and in the inner city through the MCMA. And that was a great experience. I loved it. And I started to think, well, you know what, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get the after degree program. And, you know, it's a back pocket insurance policy. It's like not a bad idea. I'm obsessed with education and going to school and learning. I tend to have, especially back then, had a, maybe now less, but had more energy than I knew how to deal with, you know. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and then decided, you know what, I'm done thinking about it. I'm gonna go forward. Had to finish a few courses to do a minor in English to be able to get into the program. And then, you know, did my ORF training, partially because I was doing the after degree program. All of my education experience is predominantly in classroom. And then, you know, did my practicums part-time in classroom, part-time in music. But what's really interesting about all of these things is that, you know, at the time, like I'd gone and spoken with beautiful human Joan Linklater about it. And, you know, she just was saying, you know, just do your ORF levels and just work on that. And, you know, we need you, we need string players, we need music teachers, we need people that can speak French. So just, you know, do what you have to do. And so I did. But, you know, and while I was doing it, I was really interested in the courses. But part of me was always like, well, I'm probably like going to teach music, but here I am doing, you know, math and ELA and all of these other courses. But what's interesting is, of course, that's worked to my benefit. I've done so much work in the school system with cross-curricular learning and learning arts in the classroom, and felt a lot of confidence in my ability to do that because I understood the curriculum in these other areas. And also had a chance in education to really think, well, hey, I'm learning about all these other curricular areas, and how can I incorporate these things in music? Not even thinking about the fact that I would have later on in my life a job where I worked part-time as a music teacher and part-time as a co-teacher in classrooms doing exactly that. So in Seven Oaks, who we, you know, are just I would say, real leaders in the cross-curricular and arts education being in the classrooms. So they really gave me so much experience at that. But I wouldn't have known, through all these things, I would have never known that this would all lead me up to this place. And then, I ended up leaving Seven Oaks because my very dear friend and working partner, she is my work wife, and I love her to bits and pieces. Her name is Kristjanna Oleson, and she had switched over to École Pré-Cézanne. Gisèle Laflèche had retired, and Kristjan's kids go to Pré-Cézanne. And we had sort of thought that, probably we wouldn't work together again. And before she even started her job in September, she called me in June and said, the band position is opened up. What do you think? And I said, sign me up. Haven't taught band before, but why don't we try to go? Why don't we do that? And so I was ready for a change. I was ready to have, I had been teaching violin programs and ORF in the early years. And I knew there was some ORF teaching as well in this job. I teach currently grade 4 to grade 8. So grade 4 and 5, I still teach ORF-based stuff there too. But I really jumped at the chance to work with Kristjanna again. It's closer to my home. I also really felt that I needed to put myself somewhere where my French got a good kick in the right direction. I love French. I love learning. I learn every day from my coworkers, and being in this environment where my coworkers, it's the majority of the people there, it's their first language. And we have students that they do have a second language, but it's not English, and French is a second language to them, and English is like a fourth or fifth language. Like, it's just way down the line. So so here I find myself in a band room, and I go, okay, well, I played a little bit of flute, played a little bit of French horn, played a little bit of drum kit. I can do this. I can figure this out. And it's been fantastic. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm in my second year. I'm figuring things out, but I'm having a great time doing it. I love my kids. I never thought I would be a band teacher ever. And here I am. Yeah.
And it's such a fun age to teach, isn't it?
It is such a fun age to teach. I used to be terrified of junior high kids.
High school scares me way more.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I did also work as an EA for a short time in Winnipeg 1. And when I worked as an EA, which is a bit of a different kind of situation, I did get some positions in junior high. And at the time, I think when I was about 23, 24 years old, I looked like I was maybe 17 or 18. When I was 17 or 18, I looked like I was about 13. So I felt like I would be kind of eaten alive when I would go to junior high or high schools, but I love it now. I just adore it. I love the kids. I love the time of life. I think it's a really interesting age, and we're in a really interesting era to be that age.
And you know what makes the biggest difference between you being an EA in that situation and now is that now you have relationships with those kids, and those kids, I think that's what really fuels them. They need to feel safe, right? And so you having built 2 years now with middle years kids who trust you and know you, it makes all the difference.
It does make all the difference, yeah. And I'm loving it. It's sorry, my dogs are. I love this, Joanne. My dogs' names are Yoda and Abby Bear Chewbacca. So,
I love it.
Well, to be with you.
So I'm excited and terrified to ask you the next question. And of course, remember, it is a family show. What is the weirdest gig that you have ever been involved in?
I was thinking about this. No, you know what? It's very PG, but it's funny. I was thinking about this, and I was like, I guess, there have been a few, like I can think of a few interesting things, but this one was like, goes down in history as like, I had a great time. Okay, so it was called the Maharaja dinner, and it was, there was a group of random musicians who all were into improv in various ways, from didgeridoo to electric guitar, myself on my electric 5-string violin viola, which my friend Jeremy Ham made for me long before you could buy them. FYI, just have to give a little plug to Jeremy, who is a guitar maker in Winnipeg. So what we were hired to do, we were given the menu, and it was a multi-course menu, and we improv'd the food as it came out. We improv'd all the food. So it was, and there were about 10 of us in total, that just sort of like veered on and off stage, and people just ate, and it was interesting. It was very interesting, and we ate a really delicious meal after. So I had a great
just
time.
to have seen a video of that, I can't even imagine what that would have looked like.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know whether or not anyone filmed it back then. Like, it would have been, when would that have been? That would have been like early 2000s, like maybe, early 2000s, maybe 2004 or 5, maybe. But it'd be nice. It'd be funny. It'd be fun to know whether or not someone had recorded it. And it was hours. It was hours and hours of jamming. Anyway, it was, I would say that was the most interesting, where going into it too, I remember just sitting there being like, wonder how this will go. Like, this will be fun. So, there was no music, nothing. We just.
That sounds amazing.
It was great. I love it. That's probably one of the things that I love the most, is just sitting around with people with no agenda and no pre-decided anything, and just seeing what happens.
Well, that's kind of why I like the interviews too, right? It's like, here are your questions, but where's it going to go?
Right? You're right. Yes.
So next question for you. There might be some people that are watching this that are maybe thinking about going into music as a career. What sort of advice do you have for them?
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about this too. And I wrote a few things down. But just like bullet points. So, like, first of all, don't underestimate the importance of being someone that people like to play with. And it's the same thing with work. Don't underestimate that. It's a huge part. You can be as smart as you want to be. You can be the best and the most wonderful player in the world. But if people don't want to play with you, man, it's going to be limited what you can do. And if you're not a great player, but people enjoy your company, you're going to get called. You're going to be all right. So there's that. And hand in hand with that, though, be prepared. Be prepared when you go to and work at it now. Work at it now with band, with anything. Learn your notes. It's really basic. There's this great documentary, and I recommend any teacher or student to watch it. That's called The Whole Gritty City. Do you know this documentary? No. It's marching bands in New Orleans post the New Orleans flood. It's great. And there's this one scene where this kid says to his band teacher, like what do I got to do? Because to get into these Mardi Gras marching bands, to be chosen to play in those, you have to be on it. You have to be really good. And this one kid says, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? And his teacher, like, he's just so flat out. He's like, learn your part. And I can't stress how basic, but how important that one thing. It will set apart people who will do really well from people who won't, because just learn your part, learn your notes. There's no magic in it. It's really basic. And magic will come from what you can learn from your teachers if you go in knowing your part. But if your teachers are having to spend their time teaching you how to practice your part, which you probably already know how to do that, we can't do much until you know your notes. So learn your notes. So that's like another thing that I would say is really important. And the other thing is do everything you can now while you're young. I had people tell me that and say, when you decide to have a family and when you decide to own a house and all that, life will change, things will get busy. I'm so glad that I had people telling me, spend as much time as you can out playing in a practice room, like don't take stuff on that, like 2 dogs and a house and, you know, a kid. Wait for that and do as much as you can while you have that freedom. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I think we've both had some fun adventures that have really shaped us to who we are.
Yeah, I think so.
And finally, any extra last little tidbits, worldly wisdom that you want to pass along to people that might help them through these weird times we're in right now?
Oh yeah, these weird times. Yeah, it's a great time to play. Great time to play music.
Great time to get a drum kit.
Great time to get a drum kit. I got a drum kit. Oh yes, I was telling you that earlier. Yeah, so yeah, it's a great, you know, and I'm going to pass on a little piece of advice that my dad has always said. You know, never ever worry about spending money on education, sports equipment, or musical instruments. Don't worry about it. Those are 3 things that you just never have to worry about. Now, admittedly, I've gone into debt here and there because I don't worry about it, but it's always worked out in the wash. And this is a really great time to spend on, and I don't want to say bettering yourself, on your passions, like to spend on your passions. Like don't have a should-free month. Work at having a should-free month. Don't do anything that you should do. Really, like what are you feeling called to do? Give yourself that gift. I did that for a week because I was feeling like I was doing the shoulds too much, and it re-grounded me. That was when I bought the drum kit because I was like, okay, like what are we wanting to do here? Yeah, the house and messiness and all of that. You'll always have something to clean. You'll always have something to work at. You'll always have something to better. But really listen to that spark of joy. What's, you know, Mary Kondo your life while you're in this isolation, and really listen to what's sparking joy.
Well, you sparked so much joy in me. And I was just, before I say goodbye to you, I was also remembering you and I taught at the conservatory together.
We did. Yes,
well,
we certainly did.
I think that's where we spent our most time together during that decade or whatever, right? And then of course the last few years it's morphed to something different, but I just remember standing there chatting with you at sort of the reception desk a lot between students. So yeah, I don't know how I'd forgotten about that before. As you were talking, it just sort of popped in my head. So
I'm having flashes right now and I'm like, yeah, that's right. Amazing. Hey, amazing. So, and that's the thing, young beautiful young people like us and younger, we have so much life to live, and there's so much beauty and so many great people, so many great things to do. So I mean, you know, really like get yourself out there as much as you can in terms of finding those communities that spark joy, that make you happy. And I know right now it's mostly online. But that's okay too. That's okay too, you know.
Well, thank you again. It's been so fantastic to get a chance to catch up with you both before our recording and now. And I can't wait to see you in person to give you a great big hug. This has been great.
Me too. And thank you for all the work you're doing. This series and your videos are also sparking joy in me. They're making me feel very happy and inspired and motivated. So thank you. Keep up the awesome work.
For that. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks, Kristjanna.
Bye.
Bye.